If you want better conversations, conversations where people actually listen to you, where you stop rambling, where you sound sharp, fast, decisive, then today's episode is for you, because I've realized something. Communication isn't a soft skill. It is a science. And scientists can now tell you what makes someone magnetic and what makes someone instantly forgettable. So I'm going to give you a bunch of research-backed, neuroscience-backed communication tools that I've realized almost all of the top 1% use, but nobody else talks about. This is how you change the way you speak in minutes, not years. Mindset shift number 1. People mirror your micro behaviors in about 200 milliseconds. Think like less than the blink of an eye. This is something called the Neuroecho Effect, and it is pretty wild. So neuroscientists at the University of Parma discovered that your brain has mirror neurons that fire within 200 milliseconds of watching someone else move or emote, which basically means people don't respond to what you say. They respond to the emotional signal you send before the words even happen. So if you speak in tension, their nervous system tenses. If you speak more certainty, their nervous system calms. If you are scattered, they kind of mirror that scattered. If you speak grounded, they become more grounded. And this is the real reason that top speakers, or the people that you look up to, or the CEOs you look up to in the world, they look pretty calm when they speak, because they're actually trying to regulate the room's nervous system without anyone noticing. You know, I remember when I walked into a room of a bunch of private equity guys. You can imagine a mahogany table, a bunch of guys in suits sitting around it. I am the youngest person by far. I am the only female. I know it is a stereotype, but it is what happened at that point. We were coming in to talk about my company, and there was no chair for me. Nobody stood up. Nobody asked to pull up a chair. And they were sort of all arguing on top of each other, talking about things, ignoring me. And there's many ways I could have approached this conversation, but I walked in. Then I pulled up a chair and I just sat down quietly and I waited. I didn't try to speak over them. I didn't try to push through them. I just sat there like I had all the time in the world for them to figure out their small things. Because here is why I made a promise to myself that I do not make myself small for small men. And I don't think you should do so either. You know, I've walked into meetings where everyone is talking over each other like caffeinated squirrels. I don't play that game. I sit quiet, and within like 30 to 90 seconds, the entire energy shifts back towards you, because people mirror these micro behaviors faster than they actually process your words. They would never listen to me if I started piping in, if I started shouting, if I tried to get their attention and said, quietly, let the room come to you. Then there is this other thing that is fascinating about the brain and the way you communicate, and that is that the brain is addicted to novelty, not logic. So they call this the orienting response. So if you want to instantly grab somebody's attention, you need to give them something unexpected. Right? So there is a Russian neuroscientist that discovered this reflex, but anytime a brain encounters novelty, it diverts a lot of processing power to it. And so your brain is actually wired to prioritize surprise, curiosity, pattern breaks over logical information. That is how we get you on TikTok with these crazy clickbait little videos that happen, right? So the way you start a conversation matters more than the conversation itself, which is crazy. If you lead with something that disrupts the brain, that is a surprising fact, a bold statement, a strange question, the brain literally has to pay attention, and then it has to stick there for a second because it is actually manually processing it. Sort of like a car starting up a motor slowly. So I want you to ask yourself, how many times do you worry about all the things that you are going to say to somebody, but not just what the first sentence is? 3, I think people judge your intelligence by clarity, not complexity. This took me a long time to realize. It is called the simplicity anchor. So a study from the University of Munich found something really fascinating. When speakers use simple language, listeners rate them as smarter, more competent, more trustworthy. But when speakers use complicated or overly technical language, listeners assume they're hiding something insecure, not as smart as they look. And I've seen this firsthand when you go into an investment meeting. One of the first things you want to do is you want the other person to think that you are smart. You are asking for money from them. But immediately listen to it. Next time you get your spidey senses up on somebody because they start using words like cogent. And I find this to be divisive instead of like that makes sense. And I'm not sure everybody would agree with that. So if you want people to think you are smart, the crazy part is you got to stop trying to sound smart. Simplicity actually shows a new IQ signal. It shows a higher IQ signal. The other part about this that is true is that questions actually increase dopamine. So they call this the curiosity loop, Carnegie Mellon. Scientists discovered that when you ask someone a question, especially an open-ended one, their brain releases dopamine, right? That is like the happiness drug. Dopamine makes people more alert, more engaged. and more curious. This is why questions pull people into conversations, not away from them. How many times have you been in a conversation with somebody and they're just talking about themselves and you want to die until like you can get a word in or potentially, I don't know, respond to something? That is why one of the most famous books of all time, which is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, the entire book, you can skip it. The book goes like this: shut up, listen more. People care more about what you know about them than what they know about you. So try opening next time with something like, hey, can I ask you something I've never asked before? Do you want to hear something strange? Can I test an idea on you? It is like, ooh, me, I am so special. This is just for you and I. It is something unique. You know, I once closed a deal because I asked the seller what would make this sale feel like a relief instead of a risk. I could just tell he was like super tight. He didn't want to sell his business. There is so many physical reactions people have. He had these little hives. It actually happens a lot on men. I've noticed when they're nervous, they'll break out in kind of red splotches on their neck. And I could just tell he was in a heightened state. He didn't really want to talk about his business financials. He was kind of scared that they were too messed up in order for me to want to buy this business. And so he was getting heightened and heightened and heightened. And even though I was trying to downregulate, I couldn't break him out of it. But I said instead, I just kind of leaned in quietly and was like, hey, what would make this sale feel like a relief instead of a risk? And I am quietly giving it to him. I am leaning in, showing intent. I am very focused on him, and his entire body changed because questions chemically shift conversations, especially if you pair it with the last video that we did. It is about communication and how to speak like a CEO, because your voice literally changes other people's heart rates. This is called vocal entrainment, and this one also blew my mind. University College London found that humans subconsciously sync their heartbeats to the rhythm of a speaker's voice, vocal entrainment. So if you speak rushed, restless, stressed, heart rate is going to increase. They're going to feel stressed. If you speak steady, decisive, rhythmic, their heart rate calms. They feel safer. So your voice is not just communication. It is like a remote control for other people's physiology, other people's biology and makeup and how they feel in an instance. This is probably why, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a yoga class where the yoga class is like a super fast, high-pitched voice, awful. Could be the best speaker in the world, but they have to speak. If you ever noticed, they speak in kind of this yoga tongue, like and downward dog, and then we're going to move into upward dog, and then we're going to, why is that? They're trying to rhythmically control your breathing, and this rhythmic language sounds more true to people. The processing fluency effect is actually where a Princeton study found that statements that rhyme or follow rhythm are judged as more truthful. And what does this mean? It means if the brain can process a phrase quickly, it assumes it must be correct. See how these lines feel on you right now. Move slow to move fast. What you track grows back. You repeat what you don't repair. It is kind of like, doesn't that sound like deep wisdom? It is like you repeat what you don't repair. You are like, yeah, that is true. I've noticed that, right? Like even before the meaning is processed, it sounds like wisdom. And this rhythmic language in your language can be incredibly persuasive. And so how would you use this in everyday life? Well, sometimes we call it talking in tweets. So for the founders that we teach at Contrarian Thinking, half the time I'll say, when was the last time you actually said those words out loud that you are speaking right now? Like, have you ever read somebody's email? It is a founder when they're trying to sound smart and they're like, to whom it may concern, you know. Instead, think about how you could say more, or what is called high signal with less words. So high signal to noise ratio. And that might be something like, quick follow-up on the one important thing we talked about last week. Like, how can you just be as concise as possible? If you can speak in one-liners, people will repeat your words back to you. The simpler it is, the more rhythmic it is, the more people will repeat your words back. If you can get people to repeat your words back to you, what happens? They follow you. They listen to you. They think that you are truthful because you literally put words in their mouth. If you want to get hyper-tactical on this, there's something called the 321 trick. Step 1 is pause 3 seconds. So when you are in a situation where you want to communicate aggressively, you want to be listened to, you are in one of those difficult conversations, I want you to pause for 3 seconds. This is actually going to activate part of your brain. Neuroscientists found that when you pause even briefly, your anterior cingulate cortex activates, the part of your brain responsible for error detection and attention. The pause literally kind of clears your mental windshield, allows you to see what is true or not. So if somebody says something you don't like, you are going to pause 1, 2, 3. Then you are going to do step 2, give only 2 points. This is called dual track working memory. The brain really can't process too many things at once. So it can usually process a verbal and a visual track. So when you limit to 2 points, both tracks sync. Step 3, end with one question. This is how you interrupt what is called the default mode network. So your brain has the default mode like the way that it runs every single day. It is why when you drive to the office, for instance, you ever get to the office, you're like, oh, I didn't even remember driving here. That is daydreaming your default mode network, and questions shut that down instantly. It immediately forces the brain to come into the present moment, whether it wants to or not. And this is how you pull anyone back into the conversation, even if they were drifting. So let's say you really want somebody to pay attention to you. You are going to go pause after they speak, 3, 2, 1. That is going to make them pay attention. 2-step, I want to talk about this 1 point visual plus verbal cue, last point. Do you understand what the goal is for this? Or can we talk about that 1 point together? Pulls them back into the conversation. One of the things that is most important in speaking in this day and age where we have the shorter attention span than ever is speaking in sprints, not streams, or what is called segmented speech processing. So MIT researchers found the brain processes information in chunks. After about 12 seconds of uninterrupted speech, listener attention falls to the ground. So what does that mean for us individually? Speak in 5 to 10 second sprints. This is so uncomfortable, nobody does it, and yet it works every single time. I want you to pause briefly, then continue after 5 to 10 seconds, and you are going to watch clarity skyrocket. Especially try doing this in a fight. The way to get around that is to not do what every human wants to do, which is speak for a long time. It is to go, I really just wish you wouldn't raise your voice when we spoke. Less than 10 seconds. Shut up. Let them go on. At a certain point, the shortness of your responses allows the other person to actually hear you, and it is going to shorten theirs too. They actually say you should gesture before you speak. This is called gesture priming. UC Berkeley found that gestures actually precede speech in the brain. What does that mean? Your hands help your brain form the thoughts. So if you want to think clearly while you talk, move your hands first. Like no dead hands. One of the most uncomfortable things you can do in a difficult conversation is to hide your hands. Why? The reason why actually goes back to the caveman days, which is that if our hands are hidden, we could have a weapon in them. And so no more hidden hands, no more dead hands. All of that screams that somebody could hurt you, as opposed to, hey, open hands mean I want to communicate with you. Stories stick 22 times more than facts. Stanford researchers found that people remember stories 22% more than statistics alone. Why? Because stories activate our sensory cortex, our motor cortex, and our limbic system. It is this neural coupling that lets the listener live your point rather than hear it. So remember, if you want to persuade somebody, tell them a story. Don't use a spreadsheet. Don't use numbers alone. And that goes to this idea of perceptual language. Cornell studies show that people trust speakers more when they use language based on perception. Let me give you a bad example first. We must improve operational efficiency. What does that even mean? We need to see fewer steps. We need smoother handoffs. We need cleaner workflows. Your brain likes it when they can visualize it. This is why often I like to be on a whiteboard when I am explaining complex topics. If you were to explain a topic to me, I will say I am a visual learner. And really that's saying I am a visual learner, you are not. Everybody's a visual learner. Everybody learns more and retains more when they both see it and when they are actually able to visualize it as opposed to conceptualize it. I want you to replace, I think, with I've observed. Columbia University said statements framed as observations are seen as 40% more credible than statements framed as opinions. I think is a low confidence signal. I think we should do that. Why? Just because you feel like it. I've observed, well, that seems to tell me that there's data backed behind it. You can also use the cognitive snap. I want you to use your server's name and one detail about them. Oh, Tori, is that your name? That is amazing. I love your haircut. You can also do this in meetings. Hey, John, earlier you mentioned your team was stuck. Let me show you something. I'd love to get your opinion on this. This is called self-referencing. It is like you are being referential to them first, which makes their brain think, I am getting a compliment. I am back in. You can also do something really simple, which is open your rib cage. This is called postural neuroendocrinology. When you open your rib cage and you raise your arms, that basically allows you to have what is called a calm dominance posture. When you roll your shoulders back and you open up the ribs, you can have a stronger voice because your rib cage is opening, but also it signals to the other person that you are in a dominance position. Harvard research shows you don't actually have to agree with somebody to build trust. You just have to share roughly equal speaking time. Literally, you can disagree with somebody intensely, but just give them the floor and watch what happens. If you allow somebody balance or equality, they feel it is just as good as agreement. And after you do that, I want you to end with something called a cognitive close, not a question. People follow a recommendation 60% more often than an open-ended question. So I don't want you to end with, let me know what you think. I want you to end with, here is what I recommend we do next. Here is what we should do next. Here is the next steps. That is even tighter. You are just asserting that is going to be what happens next. This is all leadership, and as you can tell, it is actually not that complex. Take 3 or 5 of these lessons, apply them to your life, and learn what it feels like to have other people lean in on every word that you say, because the game of business and of money is really just a game of communication.